Hello, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews, and welcome to my Lower Decks Season 3 Rewind review. I'm going to be going through each of the 10 episodes of Season 3 of Star Trek Lower Decks about a year later, about a year after they originally streamed. And we're getting pumped up for Lower Decks Season 4, which should be coming relatively soon. As of this recording, they have not yet announced the exact date of Season 4's premiere, but should be coming up pretty soon here. So this is the third such video that I've done like this. I did Season 1 and I did Season 2, and here is Season 3. So I'm going to go through each of the 10 episodes of the season, and I will be giving my thoughts and my review, and then I will be giving Easter eggs and observations that I noticed on my rewatch, and then I will be giving 2 ratings. I will be giving you my rewatch rating, so the rating out of 10 that I decided to give after rewatching the episode, and then I will show you my original rating that I gave about a year ago. So even though my original rating for these episodes only came about a year ago, I just noticed that 9 out of the 10 episodes have changed ratings within a year. And I didn't even really remember what I had originally given most of these episodes. So I was just going off of what I felt rewatching it. And all of them changed except for one. Episode 10 is the only one, the finale. That's the only one that stayed the same. Most of them changed in an upward direction. There's one, in fact, that went way up, and I now consider it one of the better episodes in the series, and I didn't necessarily think of it that way before. There are 3 episodes that went down, 2 that went way down. 2 episodes that I would consider having a negative rating. I'm using my brother's terminology here. He would consider 1 through 5 as a negative rating and 6 through 10 as a positive rating. So going off of that, there are 2 episodes that I gave a negative rating to. However, with my rewatch ratings, 5, a whopping half of the season, has a 9 or higher. So a 9 and 9.5 or 10, that is half of the season. That's amazing. That is an amazing season of television, even with the 2 bad or mediocre episodes, negative rating episodes, one of which being the one that I consider the worst episode in the entire series. Even with that, having five episodes that I gave a 9 or higher rating to. That's amazing. This is a great season. I don't know if season 4 can improve on this, but it would be incredible if it did. Maybe season 4 could not have the worst episode of the series. That would be good. Okay. So with that intro out of the way, let me go ahead and get through all 10 episodes, starting with season 3, episode 1. So let's get to it. Okay. Actually, before I jump into season 3, episode 1, I forgot to mention an outfit warning that you might notice that I'm suddenly changing outfits throughout this video. I'll probably change outfits at least once because I plan on recording this video over a period of 2, maybe 3 days, and I'm not going to put this outfit back on every time I record. I'll just be wearing whatever I wear. So if you're wondering why I'm wearing different clothes throughout this video, that is why. Okay, so now let us get into season 3, episode 1, which is called Grounded. So this is picking up off of the cliffhanger that I hated from season 2. This episode actually starts off pretty funny, but it fizzles really quickly. I mean, the whole Boimler thing with the raisin vineyards, that was hilarious. And then the scene at Cisco's restaurant where, where Brother Fred goes, I wonder how Mariner's taking this. And Mariner jumps in and goes, I'm taking it. I'm taking it to the limit. And they're like, did you time your interest just to say that? And she's like, no. And Boimler's like, she totally did. I was like, why are we hiding behind the door? That was funny. So there were some funny parts like that in the beginning of the episode. There was a thing with the sweet old man who was a transporter chief that they had to knock out like Star Trek 3, but they couldn't because he was so sweet. And that was kind of funny too. But then kind of after that, I think once they get to the Montana thing, the first contact theme park, I think that's when the episode really goes downhill and it never really recovers. The whole thing with that guy Gavin, and then he was the guy who rode along with them on the Phoenix ride. That was so stupid. That was just not even remotely funny. That is kind of when the episode jumped the shark, as you will. So that was dumb. I would actually go so far as to say it was actively unfunny, which is a term I use for things that are not only unfunny, but just annoy me. um, Also, really, really hated the ending. This whole thing where we're doing a Star Trek 3 parody, but it was all misdirect. And the whole time, the real heroes were saving Captain Freeman off screen. So everything important in this episode happens off screen, rendering that entire cliffhanger that I already hated, rendering it pointless. We should not have even had the cliffhanger. Like, I know the joke that they were going for here was, oh, these are lower decks, so of course they're not going to be the ones who save the day. It's going to be these other people. But and sometimes that kind of thing does work for me when lower decks does that. Like the Shax thing worked for me last year, the last season 2. Sometimes when they do jokes like that, it does work for me. But this one, I feel like they were undermining themselves by doing this. So like they were shooting themselves in the foot because they set up this cliffhanger, and then the cliffhanger is resolved with a stupid gimmick that, oh, it was actually these other people off screen. So then why did I watch this episode? What was the point of it? So that's kind of how I feel about that. Although there were funny parts at the beginning, so I wouldn't say the whole episode was pointless. Okay, let us move on to our Easter eggs and observations. So at the beginning of the episode, there's an FNN news ticker at the bottom of the screen. I'll read off some things that it said. Jellicoe bans Zebulon sisters from active duty bridge. I don't know who the Zebulon sisters are. Buffalo Solar Knights eclipse London Kings in Game 1 of ELDS. That would be the division series, I guess, of the whatever league it is. So in Deep Space Nine, baseball was extinct. So I guess maybe because of Cisco, they brought it back. I don't know, but I guess it's a thing again. 6-year-old Zach Dorn, youngest to be crowned Strategema Grandmaster. I remember the Strategema Grandmaster. Let's see what else. Country Stampede, dozen teens injured rushing stage at Sonny Clemenda concert. I don't get that reference. Other Easter eggs and observations. Admiral Buen Amigo makes his first appearance. He gives Mariner's dad the news about Carol's trial. And I didn't remember this. I thought Admiral Buen Amigo didn't come in until later in the season, but he makes a very, very quick appearance here. And he seems like a totally normal admiral in this scene. He doesn't seem like somebody who's later going to go, ooh, other Easter eggs, Boimler says, for Kirk's sake, referencing Kirk. We've got Cisco's Creole Kitchen. We've got Ketracel White hot sauce at the kitchen, which is a nice touch. Ketracel White, of course, being what the Jim Hadar were given to. It was kind of like their drug. In Bozeman, we get a lot of first contact references. The statue, you told him about the statue. The crash and burn bar with the jukebox. Ship the Vulcans came down and it is a slide. First contact music plays when they show the Phoenix ride. And then on the Phoenix ride, they're playing Magic Carpet Ride like in the movie. Um, and let's see, Captain Morgan Bateman was Kelsey Grammer's character from Cause and Effect. Of course, Tuvok is in here as well. All right, so those are my Easter eggs and observations. Now let me go ahead and let you know about my rewatch rating and my original rating. So my rewatch rating out of 10 is a 6. Started off strong, then fizzled out. Still worthy of a 6, so not a negative rating. This is not one of the episodes with a negative rating, but it is, however, one of the episodes that went down in rating, as my original rating was a 7. Although I did say in my original review that I actually probably would have given it a 6, but because it was a season premiere and I was like excited to have the show back, I probably gave it the season premiere bump and bumped it up to a 7. I actually said that in my review, and I said normally I probably would have given it a 6. So I had forgotten that I said that, and then I watched this episode and just naturally gave it a 6. So what I said before was true, because the season premiere bump doesn't apply on a rewatch. So it is a 6. All right, let us now move on to the next episode. Alrighty, let's move on to season 3, episode 2, The Least Dangerous Game. So this is where the bold Boimler thing begins, and I'm really glad it became a season-long arc and not just a one-off gimmick. I think that it actually really worked for this character, and this episode was hilarious, and it was really funny without relying hardly at all on references to previous Star Trek episodes. Unlike some of my other favorites like Crisis Point or I Excretus that really relied heavily on references to the movies or to the previous Star Trek episodes, this really didn't, and it was still funny. And it had some unique character pairings. We have Boimler and Tendi together, which I believe is only the second time we've had that pairing. There was that episode back in season 1. Mariner and Ransom paired together, and Rutherford and Billups paired together. So some of the bridge crew getting more to do in this episode. The Ransom and Mariner plot, of course, continuing on from the end of the previous week's episode where Freeman told Ransom the get on Mariner's ass or whatever. So that also like would continue through the season. So we had two plots, the A plot and the B plot, and both were really funny. So I really enjoyed both of these plots. So we had the bold Boimler plot where he's like, the next person who ask me a question, I'm going to say yes. and he meets Cratch. Cratch really reminds me of the Hirogen from Voyager. I think he was kind of a play off of that. And Cratch was so good because he was like the Hirogen, this ruthless hunter, but then he would make lighthearted quips and jokes and give advice. um, so just a couple of the funny lines that Cratch had when he says there are 3 types of prey. The first who runs and hides, or so I forget what it was, something, and then the second who does this and this and this, and the third is a winged lizard, but that doesn't apply to you. And then, of course, my favorite line of the episode, which I used for my where is it? No, this way. Screen name. Thanks for the mimosas. He's chasing Boimler through the hallway and sees Freeman, and she's like, Oh, it's lovely having breakfast with you. He's like, thanks for the mimosas, and then keeps continuing to chase Boimler. Um, and then at the end, Boimler goes, the hunted has become the hunter. and, and Crutch immediately like shoots him with the arrow. Um, and he's like, the hunted always tries to become the hunter, tale oldest time. Um, and then later on, can I give you a little feedback here? Would you decide to switch it up and become the hunter? You can't just announce it and just stand there. um, it was really good and not only really funny without relying too much on previous references to previous episodes, but also just a really good Boimler storyline that, as I said, would continue onward. And then we've got the Ransom and Mariner trying to save Rutherford and Billups, of course. Ransom, of course, is being butthead for a little while and being really stubborn. And finally, they have to go and save them. But this one actually did rely on kind of references, not direct references to episodes, but it was kind of combining a lot of things. I feel like Justice was in here with how they were all fitness crazy, but it was giving me a lot of the Apple vibes from the original series. So it was kind of not necessarily referencing one particular episode, but just sort of making fun of generalized Star Trek tropes. So we had the psychic baby and the supercomputer as co-leaders, and and they were going to throw them into a volcano. And Mariner's like, psychic baby, supercomputer, and volcano. You guys ever heard of overkill? So, uh, I did really enjoy that. Um, so I would say that the Boimler plot was a little stronger, but I also really enjoyed the psychic baby supercomputer and all that stuff. Um, and also, I should mention that I thought it was funny how Mariner um, completely disobeyed orders, and Ransom was like, I apologize. I expected you to disobey orders, and you didn't. After she had to climb all the way back up to that space elevator. So that was good as well. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about some Easter eggs and observations, and then I'll go ahead and give my rewatch rating and my original rating for this episode. So, Easter eggs and observations. So, at the beginning of the episode, we had Chancellor Martok, of course, from Deep Space Nine. He becomes the Klingon Chancellor at the end of that series. The game they're playing is based off of some real life thing that I'm not familiar with. Somebody else could probably explain it to you. And it's a Ferengi knockoff, which is pretty funny. The Delanians, yeah, it seemed like a combination of the fitness freaks from Justice and the dudes from the Apple, as I previously mentioned. Ransom has a line and he slips in there. We wouldn't want you to accidentally become a king down there, as he's referring to Billups, the episode in the previous season where Billups ever has sex, then he becomes the king. This is where Pleasant's fountains lie. It was the episode reference there. Also, we have the return of Citation Ops. The supercomputer looks kind of similar to the Jeffrey Combs computer from last season, but it's a little different. Okay, so let me go ahead and give you my new rating, my rewatch rating out of 10. I'm giving this a 9. I just love Crutch so much. I love the Boimler storyline so much. And the second storyline was also pretty funny. So I watched this and I felt very strong 9 vibes from it. And I'm very confident about this 9. My original rating last year, I only gave it an 8. So this one has gone up 1 point from an 8 to a 9. Alrighty, let's go ahead and move on to episode 3. All right, now we are on to season 3, episode 3, Mining the Mind's Mines. So, I didn't take a lot of notes on this one for my rewatch, so this will probably be a shorter review. I don't have as much to say, apparently. This one had a really rare cold opening in the style of like the X Files or a show like that, where we don't have any of the main characters. Um, and this is where that gag that they pulled in episode one works for me. I mentioned in episode one that sometimes that type of gag does work for me, and this time it did because they just kind of they had that cold open, and then they yada yadaed over the resolution to that, and then focused on the aftermath. And I was glad for it because the mystery that they set up with that cold opening, with that scientist like finding that thing and then having a fantasy and then dying. I mean, that is a cliche that we've seen before in Star Trek, and I'm not interested in that. That would have been boring. So I'm glad that they yada yada over it and got to our character stuff and got to the lower decks crew and the Cerritos crew having to clean up after that mess. That is where that type of gag works for me. So that really did work a lot better than the episode one bullshit. um, so in this episode, each of the characters has hallucinations, um, and I found them all to be interesting. Um, I love how we get our first taste of Jennifer and Mariner after it was kind of foreshadowed that they would be together at the end of episode 10 of the previous season. And I still don't think overall that we got enough of these two, but I found it interesting that Mariner's fantasy was to have to see a sexy Jennifer. Um, because that indicates that she was kind of bored with the like regular Jennifer. Um, so um, this was a sneaky strong episode for Tindy as well. I believe, is to best of my recollection, this is the first like real interactions between Tendi and Captain Freeman, where they actually share scenes together. Like I don't know that that had ever happened before, or at least not very often. And Tendi solves the mystery here. She's the one who figures it all out. Tendi has a kick-ass season in season three. I did not like her season one. Season two, they developed her character more. In season three, she has an amazing season. Um, I think my biggest complaint about this episode was the um, competition with the other crew there, the Carlsbad crew, where they were clearly being assholes, and they clearly definitely did not like our lower deckers. But then later on, I'm like, oh no, we really admire you. We're jealous of you, and like that is not true at all. Like, there's no way that that fits. So that did bother me a little, but doesn't ruin the episode for me. So let me go ahead and talk about some Easter eggs and observations. So we get Leah Brahms from the Next Generation. That seems is a little iffy. I don't know if you want to bring that back because the original story about Leah Brahms was a little sketchy. Um, I gotta mention Stevens is a character I don't like that much. The one who worships Ransom. This is his biggest role probably ever. First time he's actually in charge of something. So what else? Oh, there was that thing from the animated series. I forget what it's called. And I think that episode of the animated series is vastly overrated. um, the alien trowel from season one was referenced, and Boimler was like, it was more of a party. So that was funny as well. All right, let's go ahead and move over to my ratings. So we'll start with my rewatch rating. Out of 10, with 1 being the lowest possible score, 10 being the highest possible score, after my rewatch, I'm giving Mining the Mines an 8 out of 10, despite the little bit of the flaws and the thing with the Carlsbad, which I didn't love. Um, this was a really sneaky good character episode for Tindy. Had some really funny stuff in there. So overall, pretty strong episode. I'm giving an 8.2. Now my original rating was a 7.5. So this goes up just a half a point from a 7.5 to an 8. So another increase in rating here. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next episode. And this is where you'll see me wearing a different outfit because I'm calling it quits for tonight. But you will just see one seamless video. I will just be wearing a different outfit. So I will see you from your perspective in a couple of seconds to talk about episode 4. All right, now moving on to season 3, episode 4. A new day, new outfit for me. Same old for you. So season 3, episode 4 is called Room for Growth. So this one was fine. I think the best part was the cold open. The parody of the TNG 7th season episode Masks. And that episode gets a lot of flack for being a terrible episode. It is a notoriously bad episode. Now, if you're familiar with my brother's channel, he's often said, I don't think it's as bad as other people do. I disagree with him. It is as bad as everyone says it is. I'm also a huge detractor of season 7 of The Next Generation. I think it is easily the worst season since season 2. Not that it's as bad as seasons 1 and 2, but it is the worst one since then. I think there's a lot of bad writing. There's a lot of grasping at straws because they've run out of ideas. And I think Masks fits perfectly into that. And I think it's a very bad episode. So I love that Lower Decks picks out these bad episodes and makes fun of them. So this was a great parody. And we've got Freeman roaming the halls going, I am Manuka. And it might have been something else. So my screen name might be inaccurate. It might have been like Manuki or something, whatever. It doesn't matter. So my screen name might be inaccurate, but who cares? Whatever. I love the nonchalant attitude by Mariner. I love it when Lower Decks does this when like weird things happen and they're all like, oh God, not again. Can't you people just leave these masks alone? Good God. Because all these weird things always happen on Star Trek. So I love that when Lower Decks has the characters just be kind of like annoyed with the weird things that are happening. So that was great. After that, I mean, it wasn't terrible. It just wasn't anything amazing. So we had 2 main plot lines, and I think they were both just okay. So we've got the Tendi Mariner and Boimler versus the Delta Shift storyline. And then we've got the thing with the engineers on the relaxation ship with Captain Freeman and all that. So, yeah, the thing with the Delta Shift, I don't know. It felt kind of too similar to the previous week's episode when they had that clash with the Carlsbad, except that as I mentioned previously with the Carlsbad, there was an unrealistic turnaround for those characters. And here, the unrealistic turnaround is just a misdirect, and they were still against our main characters. And that's fine, but I just felt like competing with another group of ensigns just felt repetitive. And the Delta Shift was featured in season 1, and I don't know that they needed to be brought back. Honestly, the best part about this storyline was when they started tripping and they did all the animation with the Mariner's eyes getting really big, and that was good. I did really like that. Few jokes here and there that I liked when they went into the holodeck program, and it was an old timey bank, and Mariner's like, "Hello, I'd like to withdraw some paper with no intrinsic value." Although Star Trek in general is just really all over the place on how they value money, and I'll talk about this later in this video because it comes up again in this season. But not just Lower Decks, but Star Trek in general is extraordinarily inconsistent about how the world treats money in the future. Now, with that other storyline with the engineers refusing to relax, I mean, I suppose it's in character for them to always be wanting to fix things and not being able to stop, and just in character for engineers in general. But I don't know. The joke got old. It wasn't that amazing, and there's supposed to be this funny irony that Captain Freeman was really the one who was getting super stressed out, and in the end, the engineers build the relaxation machine for her. But my favorite aspect of this was not the Freeman getting really stressed out, but how subtly the alien lady who ran the ship was getting progressively more stressed out, and they didn't focus on it at all. It was just kind of uh, there, but they didn't focus on it. But she started smoking cigarettes, so she started getting stressed out. And by the end of it, after the engineers made that machine that would basically put her out of business, she was like, "Destroy that machine now!" She's like freaking out. So I actually found her getting stressed out funnier than Freeman getting stressed out because they were trying to hyper focus too much on the Freeman thing and make me laugh, and I felt and it didn't work for me. Whereas the thing with the alien lady who ran the ship, it was a little more subtle. So if anything, I liked that part of it. But I don't know. This whole episode was just kind of um okay. Um Oh yeah, there was one more thing I was going to mention. I forgot to mention before from the first storyline that we get the return of the bold Boimler storyline, and I'm glad it evolved from just what it was before, where he just says yes to everything. um, and I love how Mariner, she had this comment about their futures or something. And boy, you'll be dead because of this whole being bold thing. So I did like that. Um, okay, so let's go ahead and talk about Easter eggs and observations. So, as mentioned before, they reference the season 7 Next Generation episode Masks. Um, Delta Shift comes back from season 1. I'm not even sure if they're the same people from the Delta Shift. I'd have to go back and look at that episode again. Um, there's healing mud baths that look similar to what Loxana, Troy, and Alexander go into in that one episode. What was that called? The higher, the fewer. I forget what was that episode called. I'm blanking on it. I will look it up. I know that Brandon Howells and others will tell me what the episode is, but believe me, I will already have looked it up by the time you write the comment. But you can still feel free to write the comment. But I will look it up as soon as I'm done recording this. We've got the black and white holodeck bank robbing program that I mentioned. Seems to be kind of a shout out to Dixon Hill, kind of similar vibe. All right, let's go ahead and give my rating out of 10. So my rewatch rating out of 10 for season 3, episode 4, Room for Growth, is a 7. So I did really like the cold opening. There were bits here and there that I did like, but overall, this episode was like, yeah, it was fine. My original rating was a 7.5. And I said in my original review that it was kind of a tough rating for me, like that I was actually leaning 7 originally, but decided to bump it up to 0.5 because of the cold open. Now I'm kind of like, the cold open actually bumps it up from a 6 or a 6.5 up to a 7. So to me, it's a solid 7 now. And at the beginning of this video, I said that 3 episodes decreased in rating, went down. I forgot about this. This is actually a 4th one because technically it does go down half a point. So there's actually 4 episodes from this season that did go down in rating, although this one only goes down slightly. So, but there is 4. Okay, so let us now move on to the next episode. All right, let's move on to season 3, episode 5, reflections. So, the main plot, the A plot in this episode, is the Rutherford storyline that I've been waiting 3 seasons for, because Rutherford was the one out of the 4 main characters who was the least developed. And I complained about it in season 1, and I complained about it in season 2. We didn't get very much Rutherford development at all. Whereas in contrast, we started getting a lot more development for Tendi in season 2 and even more in season 3. And of course, Rutherford, or rather, Boimler and Mariner were already being developed in the first season, with the other two kind of being lagging behind and Rutherford lagging behind the most. So we finally get his backstory and we get a really interesting character story for him. And I did love how they did a little bit of a misdirect by making us think this might be some sort of alien body takeover episode, which would be kind of redundant and boring. An old trope that I'm not super huge on. So I love how they kind of made us think that it could be that. But then giving us the interesting reveal that actually this is the personality of the original Rutherford. This is how Rutherford was before he got his implants and all that. And I find that really fascinating. I do wonder about his family. Like, has his family been mentioned? Maybe it has, and I'm just not remembering. Um, I know Tendy's mentioned her parents. Of course, Mariner has her parents. I don't know if Boimler's family has really been mentioned either. But I'm just wondering because, like, wouldn't they notice a drastic personality change in their son or brother or however they're related to him? Like, would anybody say anything to him? Or is he just kind of an orphan, like out on his own? I'm just curious. Anyways, I often find these inner struggles between two parts of a person to be interesting. A lot of times, when Star Trek does it well, I mean, there's some episodes that don't do it well, like The Enemy Within, which is probably the original. But other episodes that have taken this on in one form or another, when they do it well, I do find that interesting. And I think this is kind of one of the best of those kind of episodes. And I really love the resolution of this race that he gets in with his old self. That it looks like his old self has all the advantages, um, but he comes up on top. Our Rutherford comes up on top because of his friends, and that's something that the old Rutherford didn't have. Now, while that might seem a little sappy, a little cheesy, I actually think it really works. I think it's a little touching, and I think it kind of it's a theme throughout the season. I'm starting with actually the previous season's finale. I think this theme of coming together and working together and being a team. With our 4 main characters and also with the larger ship at times too. So I really love that, and I love that it's this connection with his friends that wins the day for him, and that was very sweet. I know it might seem a little savvy, but to me it was very sweet. Um, then we have the Mariner and Boimler storyline, and I think this is one that was a little bit more sour on the first time I watched it, but I actually thought it was really, really funny this time around. I really thoroughly enjoyed it during this rewatch. Um, I think I was the first time I was a little annoyed by that archaeologist character, but now I'm kind of more used to her. So, uh, and I just love how it was Mariner who was going to lose her temper. It seemed like, and Boimler was like, "Oh, settle down," and instead it's Boimler who flips out. Now this is, a trope that we've seen before. It was in the classic Trouble with Tribbles episode where Scotty was the one telling everybody to be chill until the Enterprise, and he's the one that flips out. So it's not like that's a new thing, but it was just executed very well here. And Boimler's flip out was epic. It was so good. Um, and there's lots of references and Easter eggs in his flip out that I will get to when I get to my Easter eggs and observations. Before I do that, there was one other line that I wanted to point out that was very funny at the end where Boimler's kind of in trouble and Ransom is going to take him to the brig. Boimler's like, "You're going to send me to Starbase 80?" And Ransom goes, "Oh, hell no. That place is a hellhole. And Kayshawn goes, "Coal tar when he drowned in the swamp." They need more Kayshawn. Kayshawn doesn't get enough screen time. As I love when he says his little Darmok lines like that. Oh, that was pretty funny. Okay, now let's move on to Easter eggs and observations. So Mariner had the line, there's a new timeline where Kirk and Spock have cinematic chemistry, or I think it was Tendy's line. Oh, we're going to create a new timeline where Kirk and Spock have cinematic chemistry. They do have cinematic chemistry. What are you talking about? We get our first reference to Starbase 80 since season 1, which I didn't even realize was mentioned in season 1 until I went back and rewatched it. I think of it as a season 3 thing. Of course, we'll see it later in the season. At the booth with Mariner and Boimler, there's a Kirk and Spock cardboard cutout behind them. And someone mentioned at some point, go back in time and save Earth. And but that only happened 4 times, 5 times tops. I think it happened more than 5 times. The collectors from The Most Toys, also from last season's episode, Keisha His Eyes Wide Open, make an appearance. The conspiracy people were like, what happened to Cisco, referencing the DS9 finale. And then there's also a reference to the Next Generation episode from season 1, Conspiracy. And I believe it was Boimler who goes, no, actually, I think that really did happen. There's a reference to the uniforms always changing, which is true, especially in the modern era. Like, they can't decide what the uniforms are anymore. And then the best reference, and I missed this my first time watching it, and I had to hear other people tell me about it because I guess I wasn't paying attention for a second, but I certainly noticed it this time as you get the dudes from the first season of Deep Space Nine episode. And Boimler is yelling at them, stop trapping people inside of games. They just come out of nowhere. That's what makes it so funny. Also, we get a little reference to Star Trek II when the the previous Rutherford goes to our current Rutherford and goes, remember. I find that kind of funny that he did that. Shouting out Star Trek to The Wrath of God. Okay, let me go ahead and give my rating out of 10. So my rewatch rating after watching this episode, I decided to give this a 9.5, just slightly short of a 10. It wasn't quite 10 for me, but I love this episode a lot upon my rewatch. And so a 9.5, a very strong 9.5, feels appropriate. Now, my original rating was an 8. So this is the episode I referred to at the beginning of this video that went up a lot. And I now consider it one of the best episodes of the series, where I didn't before. And the difference is that Mariner and Boimler storyline, because I wasn't in love with it the first time I watched it. I thought it was okay, but I thought it was absolutely hilarious this time. I always loved the Rutherford storyline, so that hasn't changed. It's the difference in opinion that I hold of the Mariner and Boimler storyline that has bumped this from an 8 all the way up to a 9.5, and I'm considering this one of the best episodes of the series. So this was a great episode, just tiny bit short of a 10. All right, now we can move on to an even better episode for episode 6. All right, now it is my pleasure and delight to talk about season 3, episode 6. Hear all, trust nothing. So I am now in a place where I considering this possibly the best episode in the series. I haven't decided yet what I think is the best episode of the series. I think I give a slight edge still to the first season episode, Crisis Point, but I agree this is in the category in the conversation, and this one is too as best episode of the series. It's up there. It's in the top 3, and it is great across every single storyline. I'll start with probably the lesser of all the storylines. It's still a really good storyline, but the lesser of all of them, and that's the Mariner and Jennifer storyline. It's a good little character journey for Mariner, because at the beginning she's like, "I'm not bossy," and they all laugh at her. They think she's joking. Like, oh, that's a good one. Um, Another great joke that I enjoyed in this storyline is when the at the beginning when those girls are just like, Boimler's so sexy, and Mariner's like, oh, I'm just gonna need another one of these. This is pouring more drinks. Um, and I do really appreciate the outcome of the story about Mariner's just learning to be herself and just be okay with it. And that's a really important thing. And it's a theme. It's a theme in this episode because we get that in the Tendi storyline as well. And I think it works for each of those characters. Very strong storylines for both of them. Very strong character development. I think, the Mariner stunning everyone thing. I don't, that wasn't my favorite. And then Jennifer's dancing around and clapping. Woo, it seems a little sadistic of Jennifer. It seems like maybe a bit too much. I thought Mariner was just going to verbally rip them apart, which I think would have been a little better. But, whatever. It doesn't ruin the episode or anything. I think my biggest complaint is that they don't really do anything else with Mariner and Jennifer for the rest of the season. So it's not the fault of this episode, it's more of future episodes. They don't really dive into it any deeper than this in future episodes. Now let's talk about Tendi, because that is the best Tendi storyline to date. This is it. Tendi has come such a long way since season 1, where she was just obnoxious and just a one beat character. Loved it. So this is when Tendi is confronted with an Orion who is the exact opposite of her, who is just really leans heavily into the Orion stereotypes, and she's trying to escape those stereotypes, and of course it drives her crazy. And I found the blowout that Tendi has at the end, I found it to be more realistic and genuine than the one from that season 2 episode. The one where they were collecting all those different weird things, and she kind of has the blowout on them. That felt forced. This one felt genuine and really worked for me. But it is the resolution of the storyline that really makes it for me. It's Tendi's coming to terms and embracing her pirate past and accepting that that is part of who she is. So like Mariner learning to just kind of be herself. And for me, with the Tendi storyline in particular, her coming to terms that the past that she's trying to run away from is a part of who she is today. Can't help but think of that as a trans allegory, or at least my personal trans allegory, that it is okay for me personally to accept my past as the male that I presented myself as and believed that I was for 45 years. And it is still kind of off-putting for me to see pictures of my previous self, but I'm learning to accept that is who I am. That is part of who I am. That's who I was. And I lived that way for a long part of my life. So and for me personally, and I'm not speaking for all trans people or telling all other trans people what to do, I'm speaking personally that bringing that in to who I am now was a huge part of my transition, and learning to merge it all together and realizing that I can still be Alyssa Jean. I can still be the woman that I am, but with also recognizing who I was previously. So that's what it reminded me of. That's Tendi coming to that same kind of conclusion about her Orion pirate past, and it is okay for her to accept that into a part of who she is. And to me, this was quite beautiful, quite touching. And then Rutherford's line, "I like you for who you are," that just puts the icing on the cake. That's just like, So I've talked about all the stuff that I love about this episode, and I haven't even talked about the Deep Space Nine stuff. I mean, the Deep Space Nine stuff, speaking on icing of the cake, is the icing of the cake for this episode. Really, really puts this episode over the top for me. I mean, it is so good. It was so, so good to hear the voices of Nana Visitor and Armin Shimmerman. So good. And they were both really in character and so on point. And I love the little back and forth, the argument between Kira and Shax. I owe you one. No, I owe you one. It just keeps going on. Because I feel like whenever Kira would meet up with her, old buddies from the resistance, that they did something similar to that, although not, this was a hyperbole. This was a little more extreme, but I thought it was a great joke. And so and Quark is really perfectly Quark. I mean, Armin Shimmerman doesn't skip a beat, jumping right back into that role, even though he's just doing a voiceover now. It was really good. And to see Deep Space Nine again and to get the theme song, even though we saw it in the preseason trailer last year of the the Cerritos just circling around, like trying to stall for time, like I loved it. And Morn! Morn, oh my gosh. You couldn't do this episode without having Morn in there. I mean, come on. We also get this kind of side plot that they don't focus on much with Boimler, and fortune favors the bold. That but this was a fun storyline. There wasn't much to it, but it was fun. This is where the money thing comes. It's a little weird. Like, so at the end, he's like, "Oh, we don't even use money in Starfleet. I don't care about money." And there's a contradictory line later on in another episode I'll get to. Anyways, let's get into Easter eggs and observations. So we get the Deep Space Nine theme song, as I mentioned. There's a reference to ending up in the mirror universe with Smiley, which is references the episode crossover, as well as all of the other Deep Space Nine Mirror Universe episodes. Jennifer's biggest episode to date, Jennifer the Andorian. There's a line that it's not Starfleet Command unless they throw us a few curveballs, and Kira picks up Sisko's baseball as she said that. Warms my heart to see that baseball. The Karama are from several Deep Space Nine episodes between seasons 2 and 4, and were the first species in the Menyon that were introduced. Morn, as I mentioned before, is an Easter egg himself. One of Jennifer's friends is wearing the Ritos shirt, which I believe we first saw last season. That's in the style of disco. Oh, and then there's a reference to that crappy Enterprise episode with the Orions, where the Orion dude is like referencing the aggressive female pheromones, and Tendy's like, we don't all have those. I don't think any Orion female should have those. I think they should take that episode and sweep it under the rug and pretend like it never existed, because that episode was terrible. Anyways, Rutherford mentions wanting to have a heart-to-heart with a junior reporter, which is a reference to Jake, although at this point, Jake wouldn't be a junior reporter anymore. I feel like he would be a little older at this point. But it's a nice little callback. And then there we get the hologram with Quark's head and Kira's body from the god-awful, horrible episode Meridian from the 3rd season of Deep Space Nine. Okay, so let me go ahead and give my rating out of 10 with my rewatch. My rewatch rating for this episode is a 10. As I said, one of the best episodes in the series, if not possibly the best. I think probably Counterpoint still has a slight edge, but it is up there as one of the best episodes in the series. My original rating was only a 9. However, I actually had up to a 10 before the end of the season. I think in a later video, or maybe in my discussion with my brother, I had decided that I don't know what I was thinking, making it a mere 9. It was actually definitely a 10. That I had already decided that before the season was over. So on my rewatch, it definitely solidified itself as a 10 and one of the best episodes of the series. Now let's move on to an episode that is not quite as much one of the best episodes of the series. Okay, we move on to season 3, episode 7. So when I was doing my rewatch, there was a large gap in time between when I watched episode 6 and episode 7 because it took me a long time to get up the motivation to watch this episode because I so hated it when I first saw it, that I really wasn't looking forward to sitting through it again. But you know what? When I finally did sit down and watch it again, I realized that I was absolutely 1,000,000,000% correct. In fact, I probably was way too nice to this episode. This is absolutely one of the worst episodes in the entire franchise, and I hate it with a passion even more than I did the first time I watched it. So we go from one of the best episodes of the series to the next week, the next episode, easily hands down the worst episode of the entire series. I think the one that comes closest would be the season 1 episode, Cupid's Errant Arrow. But at least that one had our main characters in it, even if it was a really bad storyline for those characters. At least it was a bad storyline for the characters we know, instead of a bad storyline for an obnoxious character who just has no redeeming qualities and is extraordinarily irritating. That being Peanut Hamper. And Tandy was right at the end of season 1. Peanut Hamper's a dumb name. Like, it is. And the whole character, the whole concept of the character is dumb, and I cannot stand this character. So first of all, it's risky for the show to spend the first 20 minutes without any of our main characters. They did something similar last season, the previous season, with Wage Douche, although we did see our characters. They were just kind of relegated to more background roles, and we were focusing on characters we weren't familiar with. But in that episode, it really paid off because they showed us compelling characters with compelling stories. Whereas here, they take 20 minutes away from our compelling characters, that amazing Tandy development from last week. And then 2 weeks previous, we had the amazing Rutherford development, and the Mariner is having her continuing to have a good story, and Rutherford, or rather Boimler, going through the Boimler storyline. All of that is put aside. Everything that made this show compelling is put aside for the world's most irritating character for 20 minutes. It's like, this pisses me off so much. And it was a risk for the show to do this, and it did not pay off. It was the absolute opposite of paying off. This was awful. It is such a struggle for me to sit through this episode. And now that I've done this rewatch, I don't plan on ever fucking watching this episode again because it irritates me so much. So why does it bother me? This is a character that just going around insulting these nice bird people. I mean, you empathize with the bird people, and she's just going around insulting them and putting them down. And I guess it's the whole insult comic thing. I guess I'm supposed to laugh at this, but I am actively pissed off by it rather than thinking it is even remotely funny. However, this episode still could have been redeemed if the character had been redeemed. It could have been an okay episode. I probably would have made it like maybe a 5 or something, or 6, if they had actually followed through with the redemption of this character. Now, that redemption story arc was a very cliche, tropey kind of story, and they misdirected away from it. But sometimes you're better off sticking with the cliche, tropey story than trying to be cutesy and do a misdirect. And this is the absolute this is the epitome of that, where they should have just stuck with the cliche instead of trying to be cutesy with the misdirected. Oh no, she actually isn't the least bit redeemable. She's the same obnoxious character she's always been, hasn't changed a bit. So, in other words, we took away from the strong, compelling story arcs from our known characters to focus a full episode on a character who has no story arc whatsoever, no story journey, no character journey, has no character growth whatsoever. And it's the same obnoxious, annoying character she was for the whole episode, going back to the episode she appeared in season 1. So it pisses me off so much. I hate this episode. This is one of the worst episodes in the Star Trek franchise, and that is saying a lot. So let's move on. I'm tired of talking about this episode. Easter eggs and observations. JD Herzingler is in it again. That's cool. Jeffrey Combs is in it. That's cool. That's all I have to say about it. I don't care about this episode. So my rewatch rating is a 1. I'm tempted to go into negative numbers, but I don't know how far I would go. Like negative 1 million, I could go down a rabbit hole there. So we just got to stick with 1 being the lowest possible score. So this is a 1, 181. My original rating, I was a very generous 3. I think I was being way too nice with the episode, giving it, a way too high 3. This is 1, 1, 1, one of the worst episodes in the Star Trek franchise, and I am done talking about it. Now we get to move back to another great episode. It's amazing how they have this put right in between 2 really great episodes in this season. Okay, let us continue on. Another outfit change with season 3, episode 8, Crisis Point 2. Paradoxous. This is the sequel to the parody of the Star Trek feature film from season 1, Crisis Point. And I referenced this episode earlier because I do consider it one of the best episodes of the series, if not potentially my number 1 of the entire series. So this is the follow-up to that. And it was really nice to get back to quality Lower Decks after watching the worst episode in Lower Decks history with that episode 7. It's kind of like this past 3 episodes, like episodes 6, 7, and 8, are like a shit sandwich with the shit in the middle, but like the best, most amazing bread you've ever had in your life on each end. If you take them as a whole, like if you take 3 of them together, that's like watching all 3 of them in a row. That's what it's kind of like. But not really, because they don't blend together like that. It's a poor analogy because they're really each separate. But anyways, never mind about that. Let's get into this episode. So as I mentioned, it is the sequel to the excellent Crisis Point episode from season 1. And this was a really great episode for Boimler in the way that the first one was a really great episode for Mariner. But it's also a good episode for the Mariner-Boimler friendship. I feel like that has really evolved, especially since that god-awful season 1, episode 2, where I'm blanking on the name of that episode. I just reviewed it a couple months ago. The one where Mariner is this ridiculous, over-the-top Mary Sue, and Boimler does everything absolutely wrong, and everything he touches turns to shit. And that was not a great dynamic between those 2 characters that has evolved over time until we get into this really touching friendship episode here. It does take a little break from the bold Boimler gag, though they get back to it in the next 2 episodes, so it's fine. And you don't always have to do the bold Boimler gag. They have a pretty important story with Boimler facing death and dealing with death. I feel like we got a similar arc for Uhura recently in Strange New Worlds. So it's a very important story. You can take a little break from the bold Boimler thing. And this is, of course, he gets the news that his transporter clone, William Boimler, has died. And Mariner just shows herself to be a true friend. That when as soon as she like, because she's being, giving him a hard time the way she always does, and then when she leaves the holodeck and learns from Ransom that Boimler's transporter clone has died, she's like, oh no, oh my god, like, and she goes back into the holodeck and she's there for him, and she wants to be supportive of him in her own Mariner way, and I found that to be very sweet. There's also a lot of great um, lines in this episode, which I'll get to at the end. I'll go through the lines that I liked at the end. For a second now, let me move over to the surprisingly strong Tindy episode, season 3, the season of Tindy. Like, she just crushed it in this season and has so many great character moments, so many great character stories. She was really in the forefront of episode 6. This one, she's a little bit secondary to Boimler and Mariner, but at the same time, she still has a strong episode as she slowly discovers that she wants to be a captain, not just a scientist, but she wants to go on the track of command and be a captain. Um, I love the kind of interactions between her and Rutherford, where Rutherford isn't taking it seriously at all when they're in the movie and the holodeck program. He's he's just being, a complete um, uh, jerk, just kind of being like he's just goofing around, and doesn't understand why Tindy is mad about it, and Tindy probably isn't really sure why she's mad about it until she comes to the realization, like, I want to be a captain, and I want to take this seriously. And Rutherford is like, oh no, you would be a great captain. And so it's another friendship moment, another good friendship moment. Although I feel like we've already been there with Tindy and Rutherford, so the Mariner and Boimler thing was a little more impactful for me because they've come such a long way. But this was also a nice moment. Rutherford supports his friend. This is a lot of theme throughout the season. I talked about in episode 5 where Rutherford's imagination brought in his friends, and that's how he won that race against his old self. And it just is a lot. I like it. It's kind of sweet. I like it. So we get at the very end the cameo, and it is a misdirect, and I love this as a misdirect, trying to make you think that it's going to be Captain Kirk, and William Shatner, but instead we get the I am sorry, but vastly superior actor George Takei. I have been pretty vocal. I'm not a huge William Shatner fan. He's part of the franchise. He's an integral part of the franchise, a very, very important part of the franchise. But just from what I can glean of his personality, he seems like kind of a dick, kind of full of himself, and he's not a very good actor. So George Takei, I love. I follow him on all the social medias, and I love George Takei. He's like a wonderful human being. So it is wonderful to see him make this cameo. And I don't want to, I mean, I hate to jinx it, but I kind of feel like this could very well be the last appearance of George Takei in a Star Trek show in his lifetime. I mean, hopefully he lives another 10 years or whatever, but I don't know necessarily he would ever appear in another Star Trek show, even if he lives another 10 years. So um, I think whenever his time does come, like did for Nichelle Nichols this last year, hopefully a while from now, but whenever that does come, I think we can look back at this episode as a special moment, like his return to Star Trek, even if it's in animated form. Um, and he gives really good advice to Boimler, and I love how he, just Horsey will kick you now, or was it Bite? I might have an erroneous screen name. Was it Bite or Kick? I forget already. Anyways, um, so, yeah, all of that, and I haven't even gotten into how funny this episode is. This really is a hilarious episode, full of references. We get, of course, the Star Trek 2 reference when they go to the science lab, and it's like a Carol Marcus like figure. Um, and my favorite reference to the Kelvin universe, because I hate those movies. So this line made me crack up. Uh, so when Mariner was asking Boimler about what he was doing with his movie, he's like, "Does it make an alternate cinematic timeline where younger people play different versions of us?" And then Tandy goes, "Ha! Scientifically, that would be a bit of a reach." So, I hate those movies. Love that line. And then Rutherford and his, being silly, is looking at the graphics that are directly out of Star Trek 2 and go, "Whoa, those graphics are cool!" Yeah, and then when the Carol Marcus figure just like she uses a bunch of big words like technobabble, like she does a lot of different technobabble words in one sentence. And Mariner's like, yeah, Doc, you really want to avoid using that many made up words in a sentence, and which is making fun of technobabble and Star Trek. So gotta love that. Also, when they are when they first moved onto that planet and they have all the different like people in their soapboxes, like the religious people spouting their message or whatever, you hear one guy say, "We're all just holograms in a simulation," because of course they are. um Although Mariner says the Boimler, as Boimler is like kind of going off on this side plot, he's like, "We spent like an hour getting the backstory on your MacGuffin, and now we're not even going after it." I love the reference to a MacGuffin. It's brilliant. Um, Also, the third act knick-knack reveal. Cool, third act knick-knack reveal. Like, a knick-knack was freaking awesome. Love to see a return of Knick-Knack somehow. I don't know if they can work him in. Love to see a return of Knick-Knack. Um, you know, Also, I love that the plot of this movie didn't really make any sense. They were just like things would just suddenly change. Like, oh, the Romulans decided they didn't want to do the octopus thing. Now they're doing this other thing now, and like that's kind of commentary on bad movie writing. Not many of the Star Trek films, but some of them. Some of them. So I did enjoy that as well. All right, so let me move on now to my Easter eggs and observations for this episode. We got the aforementioned line that references the Kelvin universe. Um, Dr. Helena Gibson, a knockoff of Dr. Carol Marcus from Star Trek II. And that whole scene, obviously a parody of Star Trek II. The video that you watch uses the same graphics as I mentioned earlier. Enterprise, Constitution class, and Galaxy class are in those graphics. Ransom friends, when he's showing, I think it was Mariner, showed a picture of his friends. It's the bartender, Nurse Westlake, and Matt the Whale. I don't know who Nurse Westlake is. That's an Easter egg beyond my beyond my abilities. But the bartender was the one from that crappy. He was the one that was like telling Boimler and Rutherford that Mariner was actually a super spy or whatever in that crappy season 2 episode, the Megado episode. The ending with the Kitty Hawk, of course, evokes the ending of the motion picture. And also the ending with the godlike figure evokes the ending of Star Trek 5. Let's see. And then at the very, very end, I forgot to mention this in my review proper, but there is the scene at the end with the Section 31. And William Boimler is really still alive and working for Section 31, which I do find interesting. And William Boimler says, "Isn't Section 31 supposed to be a big secret? Why would we wear a big combat just to advertise who we are?" Which is poking fun at Discovery, which they have rarely done. They rarely poke fun at other modern Trek shows, but they do so here. So let's get into my ratings. My rating after a rewatch of this episode is a 10. And I'll just go ahead and say this now so I can talk about it all at once. My original rating was a 9, so I have bumped this up to a 10. I think I originally gave it a 9 because like I wanted to avoid confusion with Counter Crisis Point or Crisis Point 1 because I do consider that one of the best episodes, and I gave that a 10. So I didn't want to give this also a 10. But I think you can have different shades of 10. So I still think Crisis Point 1 is the better episode. And if I did a top 10, it would be higher ranked. But they can still both have a 10 rating because there really is no reason why this shouldn't be a 10. It has all the things, it has all the feelings, it has all the character beats, it has the touching moments, and it has the comedy. So why would this not be a 10? So that is why I've moved it up from a 9 to a 10. Now let's move on finally, because it's been my longest review of this video has been this one because I have a lot to say about it. Let's move on to the penultimate episode of season 3. Okay, let's talk now about season 3, episode 9, Trusted Sources. Now, I just have a really hard time with this episode for 2 major reasons. Like, there's 2 big flaws in this episode that I am having a hard time looking past. The first one is FNN, the Federation News Network. Now, that was actually first introduced in Star Trek Picard season 1, where we have this interviewer, interviewing Picard, and I don't know, I was a little bothered by it then, but I don't know because they didn't dive too much into it. That I was like, okay, fine. But now they've brought it back for Lower Decks, and we got it back in episode 1. I mentioned the news ticker that they had, and that's fine. It was funny to have like little Easter eggs go scroll across the screen. But now this is too much, and here's my problem with the Federation News Network. As it says in my screen name over here, it wouldn't be a thing. Like it absolutely would not be a thing. I would argue that this breaks Gene Roddenberry's vision more than anything else that Deep Space Nine ever did or Discovery did. Like this is against Gene Roddenberry's vision because there would not be a fucking corporate news network in this utopian future where apparently there is no money, but there is like this hard journalism where they're clearly just going for the glam and the not substance and just trying to sell their network and gets lots of viewership, which does not fit in to the utopian future. And yes, I know it's only Lower Decks and they're supposed to be a little silly and you can play fast and loose with some things, but you still got to stay true to the Star Trek vision, the utopian future, Gene Roddenberry's vision, and there would not be a fucking corporate news network in that vision. It doesn't belong there, and it really bothers me, and the whole existence of this reporter bothers me. I don't believe that that would be a thing, even in the silly Lower Decks universe. It bothers me. The whole concept of this episode bothers me. But then there is the second aspect of this episode that really bothers me that is also core to it, which is the Mariner sitcom misdirect cliche, where they kind of lead you to believe that she said all these terrible things, and she doesn't simply say, no, actually, this is what I said. I think she does try to be fair to her, but she could have like said, no, you bitches, I actually said blah, blah, blah. And she doesn't, and so like it could just like if there's it's one of those things that drives me crazy where if there was just a little bit of a conversation, like the problem could be solved. And it's just very much a sitcom trope that I don't really think is that good to begin with. So and that bothered me, and this is core to this episode. This is like the premise of this episode, and I didn't like it. Now there's some positives. This is not going to be like a 1 or 2 or 3 or anything like that in the ratings. I did find it interesting that they revisited those 2 planets from the Star Trek Next Generation first season episodes, Symbiosis, which were Honora and Brekka. And they showed that Picard did just fine. Like, because there's a lot of controversy. I think, or Picard broke the Prime Directive, whatever. So he did fine. So I like that. That was interesting. It was cool seeing the Breen. Even if it didn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense for them to be there, it was cool seeing them. And there were some funny parts, particularly Dr. Migliboo being put in charge of the bridge and immediately calling his mom, I think Nana, he called her, and Captain Freeman walks in and she's on the screen and he's like, Nana, I told you not to call me. That was really funny. So this was not a lost episode. There were actually lost, meaning, there's no hope for it. There are some things that I did really enjoy in that scene in particular. So not a total wash. But I can't ignore that the two major parts of this premise really bother me. Okay, so let's get into Easter eggs and observations. So, as mentioned, Honora and Brekka are planets from the season 1 TNG episode Symbiosis. The Breen come from Deep Space Nine. Mariner references the TNG episode Frame of Mind by name. She's like, this is like a frame of mind type situation. Also, we get the beluga whales from Cetacean Alps making a rare appearance. They're one of the people who were interviewed. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to my rating. So, my rewatch rating after watching this episode again is a 5. So this is the second negative rating episode, as I referred to at the beginning of this video. However, when I went back and saw what I originally gave this episode, I was quite shocked to see that I had given it an 8. I don't even know what I was thinking. I guess I wasn't bothered by the FNN and the Mariner thing as much. But they really bothered me, and it's kind of the core of the episode. So there's no way I could give this an 8. This is a solid 5 right now. So it's an episode that the rating has dropped significantly from what it was before. It's kind of going against the trend of season 3, where a lot of things have gone up. But this one has gone down because I don't even know why I would have given it an 8. I don't even know what was going through my head at the time. It was definitely a 5, like very clearly. All right, we've got one more episode left, so let's get into it. All right, let us wrap things up with the most recent episode of Slower Decks as of this recording, season 3, episode 10 of The Stars at Night. So for an episode that has to pick up from a less than stellar premise from the previous week, this one actually did pretty well for itself. This is more of a serious Star Trek episode with shades of lightheartedness and humor, which is a lot like the previous season's finale as well. And I think this one worked even better, though. And it actually has a shockingly relevant topic, although it's not the first time this is done in Star Trek. But to do it now is pretty relevant because it's about machines replacing jobs, and this goes all the way back to the original series and the Ultimate Computer episode. But with the whole AI controversy and how that's such an integral part of the writers and actors strike, I think that is a pretty relevant topic. And of course, the evil sentient AI trope is not new, but it really worked here. And I do kind of like how it kind of plays off of like previous things. Like it kind of reminds me of like what was that 2001 movie? I don't think so, Dave. Where was it? I'm not listening to you, Father. Like that seems like a thing that's been done, but they kind of were playing off of that, like parroting it. So that was good. I love that they just lean into the evil admiral trope with Admiral Buenamigo and just flat out have him go. And the funny thing is, like, I didn't necessarily catch it, or at least the first time I watched it, didn't really catch on that he was necessarily the evil admiral until he did that, because that was before the reveal that he was the one who, did all that stuff to Rutherford. So he just all of a sudden starts going, which which is funny. And Freeman has this line like, I know that you're not about that. I know that you're better than this. And he's like, no, I'm really not. I'm really not better than this. um, so we get the Rutherford mystery solved. Now, I kind of thought it would carry on to season 4, and I thought there was going to be more to it than that. So when I first saw it, I was like, I don't know how I feel about it, but after thinking on it, I definitely, it really grew on me a lot, and I think it really works for this plot. And I actually really do like how they resolve it, and I like how they kind of look back and look at Boy plan going all the way back to the Deep Space Nine episode and episode 6, kind of tying things together. So we've talked about in Strange New Worlds, or at least I have, how it is an episodic show, but has serialized stories through the characters and just serialized through lines throughout the episodic episodes. But we haven't really talked about that with Lower Decks, and it is true of Lower Decks as well. It is a very episodic show, but has these through lines. And Admiral Boinamigo's plan was one of them. Rutherford's, his thing was one of those things. And a lot of the character arcs, like Tindy's, Mariner's, Boimler's, all of them are, and Rutherford's, all of them are serialized throughout the show. So I love the Mariner storyline as she comes to realize that, she really does belong in Starfleet. So I think that was a good coming of age episode for her. Wonder if they're going to expand on it in season 4 or just kind of brush it aside, like they seem to do for a lot of the end of the season storylines. And I kind of like that she just walks past Jennifer, because Jennifer was a total bitch in the previous episode. I forgot to mention that, but I thought she was completely unfair to Mariner. I thought that she should have trusted Mariner, and she didn't. So I love that she walked right by her, and I don't think Mariner should necessarily go back to her, but we'll see. We'll see what they do next year. I love how all the calling are next year, actually like a month from now, next season, but it's like a month from now. Okay, so I love how all the Cali class ships come together, even if it's a little bit far-fetched that Mariner would be able to get them all there right then. But it was a great moment. It was a great moment for the show. Another, speaking of great moments, Shaq's getting to check the warp core and running down the hall and everybody's like cheering for him and he's a tear in his eye. That was very cute. I love that as well. So overall, this is kind of really a good feel-good episode, a good way to tie up the season, and kind of recover from last week's a little less than stellar episode, the previous week. Before this, I should say. Okay, let's get into Easter eggs and observations. So we got a lot of Cali class captains from previous episodes. Ramsey was from that season 1 episode. She temporarily took over the Cerritos. She was like Mariner's old friend, which episode? That was a kind of a forgettable episode in season 1. The Tellurite captain from season 1, and then the Bolian captain who was referenced earlier in this season. Captain Mayer from the Carlsbad earlier in the season was arguing with with Freeman all the time. And we get a reference to Admiral Picard funding that archaeologist ladies projects. So this is where I want to bring up the money thing again. So there's no money in the Federation, and yet Admiral Picard has money to fund this project. It doesn't make any sense where money fits in and where it doesn't. So Admiral Picard doesn't use money, but he funds this project. I mean, I do get that some planets would still use money. The Ferengi obviously still use money. It's only like the Federation that doesn't. But then if that's the case, then how is Admiral Picard funding anything? That doesn't make any sense. Although it does make sense because of his love for archaeology, but it doesn't make sense how he would have money. So I don't get it. So we also have a planet that phases in and out of dimensions, which is kind of similar to, but not the same as, the planet from the Deep Space Nine episode Meridian. An awful episode. This is the second Meridian reference this season, but I will forgive it because they do like to kind of make fun of terrible episodes. Um, and then also we got Ransom teaching people how to do the Riker maneuver to sit in a chair. Okay, let me go ahead and wrap this up with my ratings. So my rewatch ratings and my original rating. I'll just go ahead and tell you now because this is the one episode where it didn't change. Rewatch rating and original rating both a 9. So I started as a 9, and I'm keeping this as a solid, strong 9. A better finale than the previous year, I think. This is a very strong finale, very heartwarming, very good with character stories, and some humor thrown in there as well. So, great way to end the season. And that's it. That's all the lower decks there is right now. However, while I was recording, in the process of recording this video over the period of about 3 days, we did get an announcement about season 4. I had said previously in the video that we don't know when the season 4 is going to premiere. I'm sure that in my editing process, I'll put a little subtitle that says, actually, it is airing on September 7th. So you'll probably see that. Because when I was recording this video a couple days ago, we didn't know. Now we do know. We got a trailer for season 4. Looks fun. And we got a date, September 7th, which is later than any other Lower Deck season. And they keep pushing it back. Last year was the latest. It was like late August, and this year now we're into September. But we are still getting it roughly around the same time we always get it. So excited for that. September 7th will be season 4, and I will be reviewing it weekly. Also, speaking of reviews, I just reviewed the season 2, episode 7 of Strange New Worlds, which is the Lower Deck crossover episode, a delightful episode. And then by the time this drops, I will also have this video drops. I will also have reviewed season 2, episode 8. And I said at the end of my season 2, episode 7 video that, oh, I guess we're not doing another one of these until August 3rd. I was wrong. They are actually apparently releasing episode 8 on July 27th. So hopefully this ages well, because since this video is supposed to drop on July 28th, so hopefully that's the correct information. You'll know when you watch this video. So anyways, I will see you all very soon. Please subscribe if you have not already. Goodbye.